Hi everybody, it's me from the future. Before we jump into the video, I know that you all waited a long time for this one, but unfortunately I cannot give you the original text from the textbooks because of the Austrian law. It's pretty strict, and one suggestion for everybody who wants to start a YouTube video that's not from the US but from Europe, please inform yourself about the copy laws of your country. Why? Because the Austrian copyright law explicitly states that you cannot copy, duplicate, and publish textbooks. So, yay! And for a long time I was actually in a limbo. I decided to publish this video anyway. But to not get conflicted with the law, I decided to blur out the pages from the textbook, and I will also not show the original pages from the textbook. I will actually talk in general what Austrians learn about US history in their high schools, not only from the two textbooks, but also in other textbooks in Austria. So let's jump into the video. Hi and welcome back everybody. Today I'm going to show you what Austrians learn about US history in their high schools. I'm going to focus on two textbooks that they use, and the age we're talking about is from 15 until 19. If you saw the last video where I talked about Croatian history textbooks and what Croatians learn about US history in their high schools, you will notice a big difference. If you didn't watch the video, I will put a link down in the description below. So I don't have the books in digital form like I did with the Croatian ones, so I just went through the book and made a picture of every page where something is US related, so that you can see the original design inside. Now, before we jump into the textbooks and the US related topics inside of them, just some quick facts about Austria and Austrian history while I take the pictures. Austria is a federate state inside of Central Europe. It's a member of the European Union, and the population is around 8.9 million. The official language is German. Austria, in most parts of its history, was a leading country of the Habsburg monarchy and later on Austria-Hungary. That's why Austrian history is more related to Europe, so Eurocentric. After the Second World War and a little bit of here and there, today's modern Austria was formed. But, fun fact, Austria wasn't a part of either NATO or the Warsaw Pact. In fact, Austria is still neutral today. Regarding history classes in Austria, they do not only learn history in their history classes, but also social studies and political education. Instead of having 4 books for each year, they have 2 books, 1 book for the first 2 years and the second book for the second 2 years. The Austrian education system is divided, as you can see in the picture, into primary education, secondary education, and of course high education. Under primary education, they consider kindergartens and primary schools until the age of 10. The secondary education is divided into, let's call it just lower and upper secondary education. Under the lower secondary education, children can enroll in 3 different schools, and in the secondary or upper secondary education, they can enroll in 6 different schools. The lower secondary education is from 10 until 14 or 15. And the upper secondary education is from either 14 or 15 until 18. Under the upper secondary education, so from 14 or 15 until 18, the children can choose between a school that offers general education or a school that offers vocational education. We're going to focus on the textbooks that I use for general education schools and the one school under vocational education that is to the left. So the so-called Berufsausbildende Höhere Schule, Oberstufen Realgymnasium und Allgemeine Bildende Höhere Schule. And of course, after the secondary education, they can enroll and go into university or some other kind of higher education. Okay, so we're done with the oversimplified introduction of Austria and Austrian history. So we're just going to jump into the textbooks and see what they learn about US history. Okay, so as I said, we are going to group the students into 2 groups, so 15 and 16 and 17 and 18. The 15 and 16-year-olds, they mention, of course, Christopher Columbus, who is not directly US related, let's say that way, but he discovered America, but they talk about it in a broader context in discovering different places like Vasco da Gama and Christopher Columbus and every other a major discovery that happened during that age. They also, of course, mention the local Indians and the trade that happened between Europe and the New World. After that, there comes a big topic about the American Revolution, where they group up the early US history in one big category. So they talk about the 13 colonies and the Puritans that came over with the Mayflower. And of course, they talk about the conflict with the Native Americans. And then they jump into the War of Independence. The War of Independence is mentioned very briefly, so there are no big battles that were mentioned and so on, but the Boston Tea Party is mentioned. They focus more on what happened after the revolution, so that the Constitution was formed, that a new state was formed, which was one of a kind back then, and the 3 pillars of government. Woo! Also in the first group, so 15 and 16 years old, they talk about imperialism, and they put the US also in that context. Why? Because of conquering the native Indians and also expanding westwards, and also because of the trade with the African slaves. One big topic, and in my opinion an important topic that is not covered in the textbooks, some textbooks, is the American Civil War. Now, whatever you think about it, positive or negative, but it shaped the US that you have today. After the topic of imperialism, Austrians jumped to the First World War. The US is mentioned in the context of joining the war in 1917, and then they mention how the US started to expand its might and power throughout the world, and also that the role of the US was actually pretty significant in destroying the Central Powers. Okay, so that was the first group, the 15 and 16-year-olds. Now we jump to the second group, so 17 and 18-year-olds. Okay, so in the first 2 grades, they learn about the world and national history until the end of the First World War. And in the 3rd and 4th grade, they learn about world and national history from the end of the First World War until modern times. So the first thing that they mention is actually US related, and it's the American President Woodrow Wilson and his 14 points. As I mentioned in the video before, Woodrow Wilson and his 14 points are very important for European history, because in his 14 points there's a clause that says that nation states or nations can form, and it helped to dissolve the Habsburg monarchy with all the little ethnicities inside of them, like Czechs, Hungarians, Poles, Romanians, Croats, Serbs, and so on. The UN is of course mentioned, and it's mentioned that the US wanted to push for the UN, for the creation of the UN, but it wasn't ready to join the UN as a member state. After that, there is a bright topic about culture and how the American continent influenced Europe and spread its culture actually on the European states, especially in cities, with dancing, with music and art. The Wall Street crash of 1929 is mentioned, and of course FDR with his New Deal is also mentioned, and he's mentioned in a positive way where he helped to revitalize the economy. Jump into the Second World War, and America is first mentioned in helping Great Britain to fight off Germany, in a sense of they put in resources into Great Britain, and then they also of course mention Pearl Harbor. Now the war in the Pacific isn't mentioned that explicitly, and not all the major battles are covered, but Midway is covered, and of course Hiroshima and Nagasaki are mentioned, but all the other like Iwo Jima and battles like that, battles for different islands, aren't mentioned. The US is of course also mentioned in the context of the Cold War, so the formation of NATO in Europe with of course the US, and the constant nuclear threat between the US and the USSR. The Cuban Missile Crisis. Now in this part they get a little bit messy, they're going back and forth between different topics, but they mention the space race, the civil rights movements, 9/11, and then they go back to 1945 and what happened after that. So the different fractions in different states that either the US supported or the USSR supported. And then they go back to the future, trade deals that the US had with China, Mexico, Canada, and the European Union and so on. And at the end, they finish with a kind of positive or cool note where they discuss the US culture again, with the hippie movement, rock, metal, and so on, and how it influenced Europe. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new and maybe got another perspective about what other countries learn about US history. If you like this video, please don't forget to hit the like button. You can also subscribe if you want to view other projects that I'm going to do on this channel. And I'm once again sorry that I couldn't show you the original texts. But if you want to see what another European country learns about US history with original text from the original textbooks, just click on the link, here. Click on the link above and, well, yeah, see ya.